Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Berto Will is your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. I'm starting sort of on the intersectionality between politics, religion, conservatism, progressivism, and a book. I want you to listen to this interview that I did yesterday that I really enjoyed it. And I think you will too. And then on the other side, we'll cover all the new news that's coming out that you kind of wonder, how is America going to take it? You know, Bolton's book is out. You know, the numbers for COVID continue to rise. You know, the states like Texas and Arizona and these other states the numbers are just rising fast. And it's like these people only want to wait to see if the emergency rooms are going to fill up, if the ICUs are going to fill up, then they'll do something about it, because otherwise the economy comes first. We don't care about humanity. We don't care who may get sick. Economy. That is what matters. Anyhow, folks, so let's go ahead and get busy. Here is the interview that I was telling you about. Let's get started. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willies. I'm here with a very, very special person, Dr. Linda Seger. Did I say that correctly, Linda?
You did. Excellent.
Now, Linda, when I got information from your folks, I saw the title of the book. I saw a title that said something about donkeys. And when I saw that title that had something about donkeys, it kind of got to me. So I said, before we get into that, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I have a very unusual background because I've been in the film industry for many years, and I have a background in drama and theology, if you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But I'm a Democrat, I'm a Christian, and I got very tired of everybody thinking the only Christians in the world were Republicans. Mm-hmm. So I wrote, Jesus Rode a Donkey, Why Millions of Christians Are Democrats.
My dear doctor, that is what we're going to talk about. Before we talk about that, I want to know about you.
Oh, okay. So I have followed this unusual path for my whole adult life. I've had this interest in drama, and I've had this interest in theology, and at times they come together, and at many times there's one half of me over on the right and one half of me over on the left. About 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I realized that my spiritual interest, my theological interest, was not being fanned in the same way my drama interest was. So I began to write spirituality books, as well as writing books on screenwriting, because I've been a script consultant for years. And Jesus Rode a Donkey is one of the results of me putting together, in this case, theology and politics, before I was putting together theology and drama. So I've gotten pretty good at putting together things that don't seem to fit.
That's interesting. Now, what is your background academically?
Well, academically, I have 3 master's degrees and a doctorate in theology. So I have a master's in religion and the arts. I have one in feminist theology. I have one in drama, and I have a PhD in drama and theology.
You spent a lot of time in school, didn't you?
I spent a lot of time.
Were you like one of those, career students or something like
No, you know what happened was I just kept following my blog. I kept following what was interesting to me, and somehow the degrees kept accumulating. And after the first master's, when I started working on the second, I thought, does this make sense? Yeah, but I'm so interested. And then they just kept happening. But I've spent a whole lot of time practicing and having a career as well.
Well, let me tell you, that is actually a good thing. There's nothing better than someone that is very curious. One of the things that I think is lacking in this country right now is the basic sense of curiosity. And not having that curiosity is one of the reasons I think we're in the state that we're in today.
Curiosity and imagination, being
Right.
creative, not just saying the same things and being over again. And I'll tell you to me, one of the most exciting things recently with the protests have been people are thinking differently. And that's the whole thing, change, being willing to blue sky and brainstorm and saying, hasn't worked this other way, let's be a little imaginative. I mean, that's our God-given gift, right, of imagination.
Well, you just gave the definition of being a progressive person. The actual name, the definition of progressive means moving forward. The definition of conservative mean maintaining where we are, conserving what we have.
Yes. And I think the progressive, it is that imagination and looking into the future, looking to the past in terms of how it can guide us, but dreaming big. There's a verse in the Bible about dreaming dreams and having visions, and that's really what we need to do to keep just resolving the problems, being willing to look at a problem and say, I'm going to address this. I'm not going to deny it. I want to move forward.
Well,
And I think another thing about progressive social justice.
mhm. Well, that's an interesting thing. I mean, that you kind of took us off on a tangent by mentioning social justice right here. But that's interesting that you would say that. Why is social justice not universal? Because your statement would seem to imply that it isn't.
Here, because I have a very broad religious background. I mean, I've been with the Southern Baptists, I've been with the Lutherans, I've been a Quaker for 40 years. But evangelicals tend to think very much about the individual relationship with accepting Jesus Christ as your personal savior. That's one of the things about evangelicals. And so they are concerned about what is my individual relationship with Christ, with God. Progressives expand that and to say we are to do right in the world. What I find interesting as I researched Jesus Rode a Donkey, I found like over 1,000 verses in the Bible that said a nation is to do justice and to be merciful. And this is for society. This is not just for the individual. And so I think progressives are a lot more willing to move out into society and to say, what about the environment? What about healthcare? What about these many, many issues? We care about everybody. It is not just about individuals.
Now, when you say it's not just about individuals, let me first qualify. I grew up a Christian, several different versions. I'm originally from Central America, Panama, which means I started as a Catholic, migrated to a Baptist, came to the United States and joined a evangelical type church. And I think it wasn't until I joined that evangelical church that I saw what you're stating there, and that is a bigger sense of individualism, which I always found strange. A quick little story. Back in the early days of college, during the apartheid system in South Africa, we presented a march to the church, this evangelical church. And this pastor said, we won't participate in that with regards to the politics. And then he said, by the way, Egberto, let me tell you something. And this was sort of on a tangent. And he said, do you know Jesus never spoke out against slavery? And I went and I read the whole New Testament. I became a humanist, but I read the whole New Testament. And by gosh, unless you tell me something that I don't know, the pastor may have been right.
There's a whole lot of things Jesus never spoke out about.
Mm-hmm.
The book is only so, the Bible is only so long. But when you look at the sweep of the Bible, and that's what theology does, it looks
Mm-hmm.
at the whole sweep and says, what's the Bible talking about? One is overcoming oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the first mission statements of Jesus, to set at liberty those who are oppressed. And then this whole sweep about saying we are to care about others, we are to love our neighbor. And Jesus said, our concept of the neighbor has to be bigger. It's not just your friend, your family, and the person next door. So part of the Christian is challenged to keep expanding this idea. Now, you can't have slaves and think this is okay because Jesus didn't happen to give a lecture about it. I'm a Quaker, and Quakers were one of the first abolitionists. In fact, they got rid of their slaves about 100 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. So Quakers always said, how do you treat someone? How do you speak to the God within the other person? How do you treat them with respect and equality? Quakers were also at the beginning of the women's movement, very active in all the civil rights movements. So we've always been in prison reform. We've always been in the middle because it makes sense. If you have the Holy Spirit and if you are trying to become a better person, you also want to create a better society.
That is why we really should always watch what I think you refer to as a misinterpretation of scripture. So
Yes.
how have we as a nation misrepresented, misinterpreted scripture?
Well, one of the biggest, what I call the biggest bad theology, in Genesis, it says that we are to have dominion over the earth and subdue it. And many people think that means you conquer the earth, you do what you want with the earth. But actually, this was God giving Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden story the responsibility. How are we to treat the earth? If God says, I'm going to put this into your hands, are we to desecrate it? Are we to pollute it? Are we to not care? Are we to say whatever you want? Say, no, if it's a gift, it means to take responsibility as God would take responsibility. You get two very different theologies and different actions if you say it's about conquering the earth versus caring for the earth. And sometimes the addition is the word servanthood. We are to be servants, and therefore we are here to take care of.
Now, Dr. Seger, that's interesting. I mean, when you brought up about taking care of the earth, etc. If you take a look at all the principles that progressives stand for, and that today, I won't specifically, let's say, those that are evangelicals stand against. And we can talk about, you just talked about the environment, where we can talk about social services like healthcare, care for the family, all these things that would seem to indicate that it fits more, like you said, Jesus on a donkey, rode in on a donkey. It seems more apropos to that. Why do you think they have led themselves into that belief system, into that model?
Evangelicals tend to be more authoritarian than progressives. So it is not unusual to ask an evangelical, what do you think about this? And their answer is, I have to go ask my minister. And I have heard this said several times, and I think that's why they're followers of Trump, because the evangelical spokespeople say we have to follow this person, and so it's okay. As opposed to a progressive who would say, let me look at this. Let me think of it in big terms. I'll look at scripture. I'll look at theology. I'll look at what other people say. Maybe I'll talk to my minister, but maybe I'll talk to 10 other people. That because the minister is not the authority, but what happens, evangelicals will come up with an interpretation. And it's like, this is the interpretation we're all going to follow now. Okay. Progressives are more apt to think for themselves. And I think the other thing is progressives believe very much in the risen Christ. There's a very different thing than saying, what did Jesus say? What were those sentences I have to memorize? versus how is Christ working in the world? How what is that saving message of goodness, kindness, compassion, love? One of the early church fathers, St. Augustine, says, love and do what you will, which means if you get the love part right, you don't have to know 10,000 Bible verses. You got to
That
get the
it
love part right.
that is almost like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you as well, right? If you don't want yourself
Yes.
hurt, if you want to be treated that way, then you won't hurt somebody else, right?
And it's also love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And when Jesus was asked, who is your neighbor? He told the story of the Good Samaritan, which is basically a story about the person that you hate the most is your neighbor, and you are supposed to help that person. Um, you might have seen that picture yesterday about the London protests where the black
Yes.
man was
The
in, who
white
I
guy,
think
yeah.
was a white supremacist, I believe.
Hmm.
That is what we're talking about. You see somebody in need, you respond.
One of the activists that I work with, she actually made, I think her picture was a few years ago, was the Times Picture of the Year or something like that, where one of those right-wing actually it was a protest, and she had to put herself between some supremacists. This a black woman put herself between the supremacists to save him, and those are the things that I think that is how you judge people the most, right? When it costs
Yes.
you the most, maybe not only in physically, but in friendships and so much more. Now, I want to go off on a diagonal here because as a humanist speaking to a devout Christian, I always like to ask questions with regards to who is your God? What do you think is God? And how does that materialize itself into Jesus in your eyes?
I think that or I experience, there is a way to get in touch with the sacred. And Quakers have a lot of different words for this. So sometimes, from a very Christian perspective, they say the Christ within or the Holy Spirit. Sometimes they say the light within. Sometimes they say the seed. They say there's this spiritual side of us that we nurture. And we nurture in many ways. I mean, we read spiritual literature, we maybe go to church, we pray, we meditate, and all of this. And I grew up Lutheran, so I grew up in a very liturgical, very strong Christian theology background. I went to many, many churches trying to find what fit for me, and then I found the Quakers. So I think what often happens, evangelicals mainly times will say, "Are you a believer?" That is, do you believe in these dogmas in this list? Progressives are more apt to say, do you exhibit the work of the Holy Spirit? That is kindness, compassion, gentleness, joy, peace, love. You go through the whole list. So a progressive Christian, I think, is more apt to say, I am not making judgments with other people, but I do know if a Christian acts hatefully, that is not Christian behavior. And if somebody who is not Christian acts with kindness, the Quakers say there is that of God within, regardless of how you define yourself and what your belief system is. And I think progressive Christians tend to say that God is not limited. It's not like saying God just can't work through a Muslim or God can't work through a humanist, or they would say, no, that is not what we would believe. We believe there is that of God within that will work, and that's what attracts us. I mean, we form communities with people that we find kind.
That is, I think if more people would listen to that tenet that you just spoke about, he can work through the humanist, he can work through the Muslim, he can work through the Christian. I think a lot more people would accept that, would accept the religious then, but it's so patriarchal. It is so rigid. And I'm talking about the other side right now. Now you speak about. I tell you what. Let's do it this way. Tell me a little bit about your book and show us the book. Guys, I want you to see this book. Okay. When I saw Jesus rode a donkey, I always used to say Jesus is a socialist. That's what I used to say. You're saying Jesus rode a donkey. Well, you don't have to say what I said, but I think, yeah.
Yeah. What I do with this is I look at many of the different issues that we confront, and they are: how do we deal with healthcare? How do we deal with the environment, with war and peace, with even go into these hot button issues, abortion, LGBTQ rights. And I look at them first from the biblical perspective. Then I move to the theological perspective in terms of not just what are the individual verses, what's the sweep.
I need to interrupt a second because that is not very clear. You said you first look at the biblical perspective and then the theological. Explain that, because most of my listeners would know what you're talking about.
Yes. Okay. So let's just take homosexuality. You want to take that as a big hot button issue. So the first thing I do is I want to know how many verses in the Bible there are about homosexuals, and there are fewer than 10. Now, considering how evangelicals talk about it, you would think there's 3,000, but there are fewer than 10. Then I begin to look at those verses. What are the original words? What's the context? What is going on here? And I find, after I look at those, is that about 9 of those are about abusive sexual relationships, people taking advantage. So I find one verse in the holiness codes of 3,000 years ago, and we don't follow any other things about that. So from a Christian perspective, I come to the conclusion that I'm not so sure I could hold very tightly and cling to some kind of an attitude that we can't give people with a different sexual orientation their rights. Then I look at the theology, meaning the sweep of the Bible is about love. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And say, how could I, as a spiritual person, decide that I want to take away rights and not love the person who happens to be different than me? And then, as a spiritual person, if I have trouble with that, I need to do some prayer and meditation over this. And to me, prayer softens the edges. Prayer helps us change our attitudes. It brings light into, and instead of holding to that position where we just say, oh no, I got to judge, you say, no, open it up. And my next step might be, if I'm making judgments and if I don't know a homosexuality or a homosexual or a transgender or a lesbian, maybe it's time for me to go talk to a few people. And I will try to make some proactive movement to look at what are my attitudes and how am I going to get over those attitudes. And then, of course, I look at democracy and say, well, our Constitution is supposed to make everybody equal and celebrate. So I'm going to go toward that ideal. And that's where I think there are so many places where Christianity and democracy just come together and lead us into the same direction.
Dr. Seger, I don't know if you understand how powerful those last 2 minutes were.
Oh,
I don't think you could possibly understand that, because I think that message that you just gave there, promoted in the right places, would change a whole lot of minds, because it's never given that 2-minute type of discourse out there.
Yes.
It's
and there is an interesting thing where I think we all have to look at where, I call them stopping points, where we just say, oh, I have trouble oh, how do I talk to or engage with this other person? So, for instance, with racism, I grew up in a white town, 2,500 people, white, everybody. And so I didn't really meet any Blacks till I went to college, and I didn't even know any well till, say, graduate school. And I recognize I have a stopping point. I don't know how to engage. Okay, so what am I going to do about that? I'm going to try to put myself in situations. 1968, I was in a white and Black discussion group in a small town, Pennsylvania, and just literally put myself in the middle of it and said, it's time for me to be a learner. It's time for me to get over this. And then over the years, one of the interesting things in 2016, I had never met a transgender person. And I had the same experience in first meeting as how do I engage? And my tendency, and I think this is what people do, they pull back instead of go forward. And I said, I'm not going to do this. This is another stopping point. And I worked on myself, but I also put myself into opportunities where I could talk to some of the people, and because I'm in Colorado Springs, that were transgender. And I think we literally have to look at those attitudes in ours and say, oh, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's move beyond this. Let's take a look at, the next one. We've all got a lot of work to do, and it's individual and it's social.
We need you on the circuit, my friend. We need you on the circuit.
I'd love to. I love talking to you.
We need you on the circuit. Now, let's continue talking about your book. So we know what's the genesis of your book. Now, what do you expect the reader to get out of reading your book? Because I think if it covers 10% of the sentiment that you are putting out here, it's a winner.
First of all, I think it helps people articulate where they stand, because many times people have an attitude and say, I don't know why I just feel closer to the Democrats. I just think maybe they're more in line with Christian ideas. Oh, Linda has told me, I get it. And I've had people say, you cannot believe the number of yellow highlighters I have in your book, because they said, I never knew how to say it. I felt this, I didn't have the words, or I didn't have, because there's a lot of biblical scripture in there, I didn't have those. I think for Republicans, there are some people who have read it who have said it gives me an excuse not to vote for Trump. I said,
wow.
Somebody said that. There was somebody that said that to me, because she says, we are so entrenched in this idea that if you're Christian, you're Republican, that when we have trouble, I mean, all the lies, all the breaking of the commandments, all the hatred, all the discord, everything which is anti-Christian that we get for Trump, I wonder, how can a Christian continue to vote for this person? So if they say, well, I'm just worried about this or that, say, read my book and it will get you over it. And it will help you understand, no, don't let that one thing get in the way of you voting for a decent human being who follows Christian principles versus who we have. And I want to add just one fast little story. I went to hear Biden speak in Iowa. I went to the Iowa caucus as an observer, and I was undecided till I went in. When I walked out of the building, I was a better person than when I walked in. And I said, that is what we can get from leadership, that it is supposed to bring our better angels to the forefront and not make us meaner and nastier and more divisive and more hateful.
Now, two things further. Give us some highlights now of your book, and then I'm going to ask you something very political afterwards.
Okay. So highlights of the book. One of the interesting things, the first chapter is about the search for unity, and it takes both the Christian and a democratic perspective. Our whole country since the 1600s has been this fight between, I'm self-righteous, I'm the best, and I mean, this is what Christianity fights over, versus we've got to open this up. We have to go toward equality and diversity. And I trace really like a historical perspective of how we keep searching for that ideal as Christians and as people in a democracy. But one of the really interesting chapters for me is called The Poor and the Needy, the Widows and the Orphans, because there are thousands of verses that say you will be judged by how you treat the people who are the marginalized, the outcasts, the poor. And remember Martin Luther King said, a nation will be judged not by how it coddles the rich, but how it treats the poor.
Right.
And that's, it's amazing because many Republicans and evangelicals or Republican Christians, they can be very heartless. It's kind of like, well, our church has a mission and we will help and we give cradles and blankets. And you say, but what about the bigger picture? What about the social picture here? So that becomes extremely important. It's called in theology sometimes a preference for the poor. And it says, if you have to take a stand someplace, you're going to take the stand for the poor and the outcast. You do not take the stand for the wealthy and the privileged. That doesn't mean you don't want them to have equal rights, or doesn't mean you hate them. It just says we need to be very much about how do we care for the people who are disadvantaged.
Politically speaking, I think after speaking to you for some time now, that you think it would be an issue for Trump to get another 4 terms. I mean, 4 years. How do you approach speaking to people with your belief without alienating them to the point that they don't want to buy your book? That's just
and that's their right. And actually, when I first thought of the book and how I wrote it, was this really more of a voice for Christian Democrats? That my job on this is, God bless whoever can take on this job, but said, I'm not going to change the mind of the really conservative, the Trump lover, the Trump idolater, that don't even.
That is so important what you just said there. That is exactly, because nothing works there, right?
Yeah, and so we have to sort of say, what is my job with this versus somebody else's job? My job with this is give a voice to the Christian Democrat and Republicans who might say, that might be good for me to read that. It might give me an excuse for why I can cross over, at least in this election. That's what I hope to do. I don't need to take on the world. I have my little place in the chain of things, I have my calling, and somebody else, I hope, has that calling of what do you do with everybody else.
Well, you do it very well. Now, Dr. Seger, what would you have liked me to ask you that I haven't asked you?
Oh, that is that's what we call an adorable question. I'll tell you one of the interesting things in me pulled in this book. I am not a divisive person, and I had never written a book that was divisive in any way, and I had to pray a lot about doing this book. But I think because I have such a broad background religiously, growing up Lutheran, I got baptized a second time as a Southern Baptist. I sang with the Southern Baptist choir in Carnegie Hall. So I've been with the Presbyterians, the Methodists. I have a Catholic spiritual advisor who's a nun. I have a very, very broad background religiously. I know my Bible quite well because I was a fundamentalist for a while. Then I was an evangelical. Now I'm a Quaker. So I bring a really quite a broad perspective. And then I grew up Republican and became Democrat, and my father and my sister stayed Republican, and my mother and I became Democrats. So I really write the book from a very broad perspective.
Dr. Linda Seger, author of the latest edition of the book, Jesus Rode a Donkey, Why Millions of Christians Are Democrats. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. I must say that this humanist really enjoyed speaking to this Christian.
Yes, and I totally loved being on your show. What a great host you are, and thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. That was Linda Seger. Linda, I haven't completed reading the book. I get a ton of books from several authors, but don't have the time to go through all of that. So I have to kind of depend on synopses and then go ahead and make sure that I can get information from the author, etc., etc., etc. Anyhow, I need to bring up something here with regards to a blog post that I made, and I should have had it ready when I came out, while that was playing, but I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. For those of you who are listening, remember that you can support Politics Done Right. If you're on YouTube, you can give us a top chat, or I think they call it a top chat or something like that. If you're on some other network, you can go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Let me go ahead and become a subscriber. Thank you so much, AVQ, for the kudos. But let's stay with me, guys, because I want to give a sort of remember what I tell you. If I feel that I make a mistake in something that I write, the first thing I do is I make it right both in a blog post and on air. Now this one here is sort of, this one here is a mixed errata, if you know what I mean. And I'll explain it in a minute. I'm going to play what I played and what I blogged, and then I'm going to give an update thereafter. So let me go ahead and play what I blogged, and then we'll take it on the other side. But I want to be transparent, and I don't want to create any issues here. So here we go. I wrote a blog titled, Georgia Officer Held 5 Black Young Teenagers Going Through a Neighborhood at Gunpoint. And I stuck with that heading. That's a factual heading. But what I said was, here we go again. Police officers decided to hold young teenagers at gunpoint as they walk through a Georgia neighborhood. And the scene looks bad. And here's what I played. Let me play it. What's happening in people complain when we try to say what's happening in police departments is systemic, that there is in fact systemic racism. There are systemic problems throughout the country. And when you see the behavior of all police departments seem to be congruous, seem to be exactly the same. They treat bodies of people of color quite differently than they treat bodies otherwise. I have an interview that I did that's coming out tomorrow with a father and son that's going to put a whole lot more of this into perspective. But today, I got yet one more video that was very, very disturbing. And what I want to do is play pieces of it for you. It's right here in the I just blogged it. Take a listen to this.
Don't. I'm sick. I can't. They can't.
Come on now.
Please. Please.
Straight teenagers.
Please, sir. They can't.
Teenagers.
They can't, sir.
Teenagers. Probably ain't even 16, 17.
They're not even of age.
Probably ain't even 18.
Probably ain't
They're not even legal yet.
They can't. They
They're not
can't.
even legal yet.
They can't, sir. Why you got a gun?
Exactly.
But-
Just check them.
But
That's
what-
what
I'm not checking for myself, God.
But-
That's one against five.
But why you have a gun?
Who's gonna do something to you?
They are kids, sir. They are kids. What they doing? What did they do? What did they do wrong? What did they do wrong? Sir, what did they do wrong? Please. They
What the hell is they gonna do to you? You sound fucking retarded.
This is too much. It's too much. It's they babies.
She really can't take
And not
nobody.
even a
They
damn
babies.
Yeah, this is in fact too much. This is too much. They have them stretched out. They're patting them down. These are kids 13 to 16, according to what the person on the video is saying. And we have police cars there because they got a 911 call that said there were these black kids walking in a neighborhood, and supposedly, even though they're on public sidewalks, there is a problem. And this is the response that you get from the cops. So we have two culprits here: the people who call 911, and then the reaction from the cops. The people who call 911 know or should know by now what's going on in this country, and two, the cops should know what's going on in this country and how sensitive things are at this point in time. Yes, the problem is systemic. It's systemic in the police force, but we also have to start looking in the mirror. Now, everything that I said in that video stands, right? Except I think there is more information that needs to be spoken about. I wrote an update to it, and that's why I said I want to be clear here. That officer, I thought. Well, this is what I wrote. We may be looking at very good policing that occurred after a bad start. I have very mixed feelings about how this entire incident evolved, from the 911 call, from the store clerk to the police response. I will lay out the information the Clayton County Police put out, then get my thoughts together, because what those kids went through was shocking to the viewers, and I can't imagine how difficult it was for them. These are kids, innocent little kids. I want to show you the surveillance video that caused that store person to call the cops, okay? These are the kids out there playing. I want to show you this. Oops, I didn't really want to do it that way. All right, here are those kids playing. Maybe I can make it a little bigger. Look, exchanging bottles, bunch of little kids. You know, kids get from home, they're in a parking lot, drinking each other's drink, playing around. Now, that thing that they're throwing around is a BB gun, okay? And then I think they found it or something, and then they threw it in the grass, and then they took off. That is what caused this whole event. The guy now assumes these are black boys with a gun, and that is what caused him to call 911. The police officer, of course, has to protect himself, assuming that these kids have a gun. But there's a certain amount of risk everybody takes with the jobs that they take. And with the way that he approached the kids, already told the kids, this is what's expected of you, to be a criminal, to be a gun-wielding thing. He on it, and that's why I said I have mixed feelings, right? Because here, the impression that these kids get of the police officers is, look at what they think about us. But at the same time, I see the police officer giving these kids a warning in the store saying, look, guys, that's a BB gun. It looks like the real thing. And if it looks like the real thing, if you get a cop that's not me, they may just blow your head off. So he's giving them tough love. But I'm sitting down there saying, if these were 5 white kids running through the neighborhood and a black police officer treated these kids the way this black police officer treated these 5 black kids, to put it bluntly, sort of rough, almost like animals, right? Dogs, hold on, dog. You don't understand, dog. Hold on. And that is why I have mixed feelings. The cop, it is so difficult for me because I understand that these are kids and that the vast majority of kids act the same. That there are a few kids, black and white, but in certain neighborhoods, the preponderance is black kids in a particular culture that presents a certain way. We have to find a way to do better policing, starting with policing within the community, so that officer, when he's going to approach those kids, he already knows those kids. He already knows those kids. right? And we won't have this potential problem where these kids are treated like animals. So the reason I wanted to clarify this is I didn't want a bad feeling on the Clayton Police Department, which I thought they released they released all this data so quickly before I was done writing the blog on Daily Kos. And folks, don't forget, Daily Kos is a good progressive site that we all should support, as well as supporting egbertowillies.com on my site and others. If you're on YouTube, don't forget, give me a super chat, give me what they call a top chat, support us. But what I wanted to do is to be completely transparent, not to make a police department evil that isn't evil, because this Clayton County Police Department wanted to be transparent. I imagine it's because it's these times. I don't know the history of the department, but on this particular incident, where I think those kids got treatment they didn't deserve, it is treatment that I somewhat understand, and I would love for that police officer to be able to go ahead and give each of those guys, those kids, a hug and just say something to the effect, look, we are in some difficult times right now. I am assuming nothing about you. I have a child to go home to as well. And if somebody tells me falsely or not that you are walking with a gun, I have to verify that you're not carrying a gun. But I also want it to be known that too many times this treatment is it's only afforded to black kids and not all kids. And Ruth, the guy who was pleasantly let into that church, Mother Emmanuel's church, because of the preconceived notions of who people are, nobody expected him, right, to do that. And like I've spoken about shoplifting and all that kind of stuff, we can assume nothing. Racial profiling does not really work. In fact, racial profiling works against you if the perpetrators are smart. In other words, if I know racial profiling works in a store and I want to be a thief, I would go call up several of my white friends and say, hey, brother, let's go on a mission. And I will go in there with 2 or 3 black folk and 5 or 6 white folk, and we'll go through that store. And as I am allowing them to follow me around the store because of my hue, my white brothers and sisters will be cleaning their clocks. Same goes with aviation and all these other things. Racial profiling does not work because it can always be defeated based on the idiocy of the concept. That's all I have to say about that. Anyhow, let me run to the messages, my brothers and my sisters. Okay. All right, let's start. Michael Rudnin says the only good police officers are those who refuse to abide excessive force by their fellow violent cops. Thank you. And that's what I've been saying for a long time. In other words, if you are allowing bad cops to get away with it because of your silence, you are just as bad. Senor Michael, I'm not going to read the rest, but you're correct, sir. When police officers volunteer their jobs as part of the defund the police movement, Blue Flu, show us which jobs are unnecessary. Hermano mío. I never thought about that one, Rudnin, but I like that. Let's expand on that. Let's expand on that. That's a good point, brother. Okay, I have AVQ watching from YouTube. Thank you, brother. Thank you for watching from YouTube. We also have Michael Rudnin back again. Coronavirus first wave. The overall death toll is on the decline, but they're still losing over 1,000 per day. What a death toll to be to like, huh? Bruce Pillar, the question is, what can we do now? I can give it up, but who to follow? No, you don't have to give anything up. I'm a humanist. I don't believe in. I believe there's something out there that I am presumptuous. I cannot be an outright atheist, but I don't believe in religion or anything like that. But I accept people who do, and I respect people who do. I am starting to think that there are under the curve in oh yeah, I think you're talking about the coronavirus stuff. Okay, let's see. Curiosity is a cure to ignorance. Absolutely so. Boomer says atheists get it right and left. Okay, Boomer. Boomer, you? All right, let's see what else here. Never read the book. No, read the book. You can always learn from even those, Brother Boomer, that you believe you can't learn from. I read things that I think are silly and many times come out being the silly one because I did learn something from it. You can always learn. Don't forget that. Let's continue here. Boomer, natural history is sacred and belies much of fables. Understand humanity's road is harder and longer. It is harder and longer. But again, I used to discount religion. I don't anymore. I've grown up. That's what I tell myself. I force myself to grow up to understand that some people get things out of religion that they don't get elsewhere. So therefore, religion also has a purpose. You know, whether it's real fantasy or otherwise, that's above my pay grade. But people get something out of it, let them continue getting something out of it. And that's how I grew up. At first, I wanted religion gone because of what they did when I was in college. But now I understand. Okay, let's see. No, the lines of detente must move. Boomer you. Okay, I don't know what that means. Maybe something that I missed. Rose William, welcome aboard, my friend. How you doing? Let's see. Boomer you. God, don't say that, Boomer you, because but Brother Boomer you said you're an atheist. I think I read up top. Maybe I'm wrong. But assuming you're an atheist means you don't believe in God, so then God can't suck because you don't believe in God. Come on, Boomer you, my brother. Okay, let's see. Para ver. AVQ, another thought. God hates amputees. What are you doing, AVQ? Come on, AVQ. All right, let's see. Senor Reynolds. Hey, everyone. Brother Reynolds, I hope you were here and not just getting here that late. 30 minutes into a show. That means you would have missed that great lady, Linda Seger. Very good speech. I see I might prefer Democrats because at least they'll lie to me about being for the issues I Rodnin, let me tell you, Rodnin, but we are going to elect real people that are going to do the real things, brothers. Okay, let's see what else here. Michael Rodnin, Biden, Come on, Michael. Come on, Michael Rodnin. You know what I said, Michael Rodnin? Okay. Bernie's ideas and passions. I like Bernie's ideas and passion. I was a Bernie delegate. AVQ, Greens are closer to Bernie's ideas and passion than establishment Democrats. Yeah, but there are some interesting issues with Greens too, my brother. AVQ also says, and yes, there are some progressives in the Democratic Party, but not nearly enough of them. But guess what? Our generation, your generation is going to make a change of that. All right, let's see. I can't read them all, but AVQ says, Egberto is my favorite. Try my best to watch daily. Promote it then, brother. I appreciate you for saying, man, that melts the heart. That melts the heart. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Please remember to share AVQ. All right, let's see. Norman, Michael, please explain how you perceive another choice than the binary Trump-Biden. Uh-oh. Hey, Michael, you and Norman can take care of that together, brother. I'm out. Let's see. Bruce, change nation to species. Bruce, you always have to come up with something smart, Bruce. That is smart. Very smart. Let's see. YouTube comments don't relate to FB. Oh, it doesn't? No, I think it does, AVQ. Oh, well, actually, I don't think I've tested that one because it actually comes to my... I got to investigate that. I rode a donkey once. That's Jesus. ¿Cómo estás, Jesus? All right, let's see what else is here. AVQ. Boomer says, yes, I held my nose before to eat a meal. I ate donkey. You're still fake news. I ate donkey. You're still fake news. Boomer, are you calling your friend fake news, Boomer? I don't think you're meaning that I'm giving you fake news, brother. But I still love you. Nothing. I still love you. All right, let's see. Egberto helps to read the rest of it to know what I'm talking about. God hates amputees. There's never been an instance of spontaneous regeneration through divine means. Oh, God. You know something? I shouldn't say this, but I told somebody special if they got over their, they're like, what is it going to take to get you back into the church? Well, this person has an illness that that you don't recover from. And I said, I could say that without creating problems. I said, if they cure you of that, then I will join the church, because I know that, as Brother AVQ said, anyhow. So who is left in a two-party system? All right, YouTube comments do not relate to Facebook. Okay, Rudnan, thank you for making it definitive. AVQ, Boomer, you said Jesus was fake. Okay, we're at 57, so I got to do my little promo, guys. Stick with me and see my promo. Here, Politics Done Right, or rather, as I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. It's a good book. It's still valuable. Go to store.politicsdoneright.com, store.politicsdoneright.com to get that book. And of course, I know I've always had my weight problems, and I've conquered it over the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. And I wrote the book that said, How Did I Do It? What is it called? Lose Weight and Be Fit Now. You say, why are you, political guy, trying to sell a weight loss book on your show? Because I'm trying to get some income from the show, and since it's a personal thing as well, I think it could be helpful to others as well. So you can get, and by the way, I have some Black Lives Matter cups and at the store now, and I have face masks. All of you are gonna have to get face masks. Why not buy some face masks from Politics Done Right so that you can support us as well? So please go to store.politicsdoneright.com. Please become a subscriber. Very inexpensive. Go to, where do you go? Patreon.com/politicsdoneright. 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 And you can become a subscriber of our program. By becoming a subscriber, you can see all the different little benefits that you get. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a 2-minute or maybe a 2-minute or 1-minute promo that I don't have to repeat this, because I never say things right. And lastly, you can also contribute at paypal.me/politicsdoneright, paypal.me/politicsdoneright. Here's a store that I always forget to put up. Folks, my name is Egberto Willies. I thank you so kindly for being here. I know it is actually an honor. You could be anywhere. The internet is huge. And that I can get a little piece of the internet makes one happy. I thank you so kindly for being here. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out! I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel, and please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.